Joining me now, I have founder and executive director at the National Security Institute and former associate counsel to former President George W. Bush, Jamil Jaffer, along with NewsNation international correspondent Robert Sherman, live in Israel, and senior congressional correspondent Joe Khalil, who's with us in Washington at the White House this morning. Gentlemen, good morning to all of you. Jamil, let me start with you. What are your weekend predictions for how talks are about to go in Pakistan? And does Iran change its tune just because the vice president is in the room?
Well, Markie, it does appear that there is something of a lack of a meeting of minds when it comes to the ceasefire. Obviously, we saw the Israeli attacks in Lebanon. Iran thought that Lebanon was part of the deal, which it clearly was not. The Straits of Hormuz were not fully reopened yesterday, as everyone expected. So that's obviously causing some tension. And then there's a large set of disagreements about where the final end state of this thing should end up in a couple of weeks, if and when the ceasefire does hold, because the Iranians think that they're going to have nuclear enrichment. The administration clearly doesn't think so. And I do think that the addition of J.D. Vance does change things a bit because, as we all know, he's been a skeptic of this conflict inside the administration. The president called him out for it a couple of times. And so the Iranians may see him as a potential opportunity to get a deal done and get this conflict ended. The question is, what is the president willing to concede on? And what are the Iranians willing to concede on to get to a deal in this next 2-week period, assuming the ceasefire holds?
Joe, is there any truth to the reports that Iran is more interested in working with Vice President J.D. Vance, and could his leverage get a deal done?
Yeah, I mean, he may have a bit more credibility in terms of peace talks because, let's be clear, there's very little trust between the Iranian side and the United States when it comes to working out these kinds of agreements. But to Jamil's point, Vice President Vance has very clearly been the one person who has been the most sort of anti-war. We see that in reporting behind the scenes, even publicly, when he's been asked about his views on, the wisdom of taking the military option. He would always defer to, well, the president has said. And, I remember even talking to him as a senator, and he, would often go back on his own experiences in Iraq to talk about why, the U.S. needs to be avoiding Middle East conflict. So I certainly think there is something to the idea that perhaps given all of that history and background and even recent reporting, perhaps they take what he says maybe a little more seriously. I still think there's a big sort of trust gap that, is going to make the Saturday discussions difficult, I think, by any measure. Certainly, we've already seen, from the Israeli side to the Iranian side and even the U.S. side, everyone is still sort of keeping military options on the table if this goes sour. Yeah. So it's a challenge regardless of who's going to be in that room.
And Robert, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming Israel will also be in that room as well. And Jamil brought up the fighting in Lebanon, and we saw the deadliest attack yesterday that we have seen since this latest Israel-Hezbollah war began, 182 dead. What's your understanding on how close or how far apart the United States and Israel are right now on how to end this war?
Well, I mean, what I would say is that, if you look at the public perspective that is here in Israel, for example, there are some pretty deep questions in the United States about whether the United States should be involved or not. For a country such as Israel, which is, a democracy, that has its own political divides here, I'm not sure if I've seen the country so united. Overwhelmingly, the public here is in approval of the war that has been ongoing with Iran. In fact, there are public surveys here, that have put that number closer to 80%, if that puts that in perspective. And that is lined up with all the organic conversations that we have had on the ground here. So there are some differences between the Israeli public and the American public. When it comes to the officials' point of view, I would say is that Israel does view this as a unique opportunity in order to rid the region of instability. There is this deeper belief here in Israel that all tensions, all forms of instability here, they can all be traced back to Tehran, whether that's Hezbollah, whether that's the Houthis, whether that is militias that operate out of Syria or Iraq. All of those forms of instability that you've seen over the last few years can be traced back to the arming and the funding that has come from Tehran itself. So that is why there's this broader ambition here in Israel in order to see this done and dusted once and for all, in which why you've seen Israel pressing forward with Hezbollah in Lebanon, another theater in which they have viewed as something that they are absolutely fed up with at this juncture here. This is viewed as a once in a seldom, perhaps, opportunity in order to really bring about stability. And more broadly speaking, the hope is that it opens up diplomacy with some of these other countries that are around the region. So that is the broad vision that Israelis are hoping to see out of all of this.
Jamil, let's take a quick listen to what Vance claims are the president's sticking points this weekend.
What the president has said is that we don't want Iran to have the capacity to build a nuclear weapon. The president's also said that we don't want Iran enriching towards a nuclear weapon, and we want Iran to give up the nuclear fuel. Those are going to be our demands during the negotiation. And
yeah, Jamil, however, last night in Trump's Truth Social post, he claimed that it was agreed to a long time ago, and despite all the fake rhetoric to the contrary, no nuclear weapons, and that the Strait of Hormuz would be open and safe. If that's the case, why are we negotiating that this weekend? If that's already been agreed to.
No, it's a great question, Markie. I mean, the Iranians have said exactly the opposite. They've said that the U.S. has accepted their ability to enrich domestically. So obviously the sides are very far apart. Whenever you talk about a contract or an agreement between two countries, two parties, two companies, you have to have a meeting of the minds. And what clearly is not the case here, whether it's on the ceasefire or the long-term outcome, there's not a meeting of minds about what the two sides have agreed to. And so we'll see. It's good that Vice President Vance has made clear no enrichment, no weapons, no nuclear capability, and they've got to send that enriched fuel out. Those are the right points to be making. The question is, will the Iranians accept that? And if they won't, what's the U.S. willing to do to get them to that point in the game? That would be a big difference from the prior nuclear deal where we allowed them to have domestic enrichment. That was part of what made, I think, the nuclear deal, the Obama nuclear deal, unacceptable to President Trump and his team.
Well, we'll see what comes to fruition this weekend and where that puts us next Monday morning. Jamil Jaffer, Robert Sherman, Joe Khalil, I got to end it there, but thank you all so very much, as always.